Really appreciate the opportunity to present today. Um, I guess the only thing worse than presenting in the middle of the afternoon is being the third speaker to present in the middle of the afternoon. But hopefully, you guys still have some uh, brain power left. Um, yeah, so today I'm going to be talking about fiber optics. That's my area of expertise. So I've spent 7 years at AFL in various positions as an application engineer, mostly in our energy group covering optical ground wire and ADSS cable. Just recently transitioned into the product line manager position for ADSS cable. So that's what we'll be talking about mostly today. I know the focus of the presentations today is on substation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about fiber optics in the substation, but also cover some other areas of fiber throughout the grid and the different stages of the electricity delivery system. So hopefully that's going to be interesting for you and you'll learn something today. See if I can advance my slides here. Perfect. Okay. I'll start with a little bit of an introduction to who AFL is. My quick quick and dirty take on what grid modernization means and how fiber optics applies to that. And then we're going to go through uh, the different stages of the grid and how fiber optics are used in each. And at the very end, we'll talk a little bit about how technology is advancing in the area of fiber optics. Um, Even though we may not see that in the electric utility area yet, it might be coming down the pike pretty soon. So, quick introduction to AFL. We started in 1984. When we started, we were solely an optical ground wire company. That's how we began. But since then, we have expanded quite a bit. So we now offer a full range of fiber optic cable products, splicers, um, test and inspection equipment for fiber optics. And then some of you may know us from our accessories group, which offers substation accessories, conductor hardware, um, just a wide variety of products. So AFL is kind of positioned well right now in the major growth areas of broadband, data center, and energy. So each one of those areas is seeing huge growth right now, and AFL is at the center of all of that. So we have business units that service all three of those, although our roots do go back to the energy market with that optical ground wire start and with the accessories group that we've had for many decades. All right. So in thinking about how to address this group today, I thought a little bit about grid modernization, what I think of it as, how we interpret it. It's a little bit buzzwordy. I think you hear terms like smart grid, grid modernization, AI data centers, they're buzzwordy. But what does it actually mean in a more practical sense? And to me, if I had to boil it down into one sentence, I'd say grid modernization is building a grid that is equipped to deliver reliable and stable electricity while addressing today's emerging risks and opportunities. So I want to say risks and opportunities because I think there's uh, plenty of both. And if I were to list a few of them, you can see here with these bullet points. One of our great opportunities is technological advancement. Um, but with that comes a lot of other risks as well. We're seeing unprecedented growing demand, aging infrastructure, bringing on distributed energy resources, renewables. Um, AI and data centers are a huge topic right now, geopolitical issues and unrest, and then an increase in natural disasters. So, um, To me, there's kind of two sides to the grid mod coin, if I was to boil it down and put it simply, and that would be one, you can build physical infrastructure that fails less often, or two, you can build robust protection and control systems that mitigate the impacts of failures when they do occur. And I'm here to make the point that fiber optic technology supports both of those initiatives, and we'll try to talk about how that is as we move forward. But just starting with the state of fiber optics in the power grid today, it's already ubiquitous. It's been around long enough at this point that it's very much entrenched in how electric utilities operate and function, and it's primarily the backbone of the communication systems that we have in place. So all of the sensors, all of the remotely controlled devices that are out in our substations at other locations in the grid are all being connected and linked back by a backbone that's composed largely of fiber optic cable. There are plenty of other technologies that can be and are used and are well suited for different types of applications. But whenever you get back to the center of it all, I think fiber optics is a great fit, especially for the long haul, long distance transmission applications. So here are a few reasons for that, why fiber optics has become so entrenched and utilized. So it's very high bandwidth. In fact, we haven't really even scratched the surface of what fiber optics could do if we needed it to, at least in the electric utility space. Low latency, literally, the signals travel at the speed of light through these cables. Long distance. So you can go, I'll call it dozens of kilometers with very little need for repeating those signals, especially with distances between substations as we have it now. Often there is no need to repeat those signals. Um, it's immune to EMI because it is not an electrical signal, it's an optical signal inside a tiny strand of glass. It's reliable, it's scalable, so you can put in more fibers than you need and come back and use those fibers as you build out your system and increase your need for bandwidth. It's secure. It can't really be tampered in. There are ways to intercept those signals, but largely, if you try to listen in on a fiber cable, you're going to end up destroying that signal, and so you'll be identified quickly. And largely, it's becoming more and more low cost as time progresses. So these are some of the reasons why fiber optics has been so successful in being adopted by power utilities. And I think that as we move forward with the modernization movement and so many of the risks and opportunities that we see, that demand and that need for fiber is only going to be increasing. So I'm going to go through transmission, distribution, and then substation, and then a few kind of specialized applications of fiber optics. So we'll kind of use that as our logical progression through the grid here. So I know many are maybe focused on substations here, so we can think of this as a periphery or an attachment or an extension of your expertise as we touch base on some of the transmission and distribution technologies, because these are the technologies that are used to get your signals from your data center, control center to the substations where your sensors and your devices actually are. So the primary fiber optic technology or cable that is utilized on a transmission system is called optical ground wire, or OPGW for short. So this is a type of cable pictured here. It's this metallic cable in the top right corner. It serves two functions. One is that it serves as a shield wire on the transmission line. So it's going to be located at the topmost position of the transmission line here. Um, and so that's there to intercept lightning strikes so that those lightning strikes don't strike the conductors farther down on the transmission lines and to just protect the system in general from lightning. And then if there's a short circuit, it provides a path to ground for those short circuit situations that may arise. But the advancement with optical ground wire was the addition of fiber optic fibers into the shield wire. So that has been largely adopted throughout the industry. If it's a new transmission build, it's very common at this point. Whenever there is going to be a shield wire installed for that shield wire to be OPGW, or at least if it's multiple shield wires on one side um, of that transmission line. So um, one of the ways that we're seeing this technology evolve as people are being more concerned with reliability and security is that OPGW is being designed to be more robust for higher wind and ice loadings, for more intense lightning strikes. So fortunately, OPGW is a very customizable product. So you can design it to be larger and heavier to be more resistant to those natural phenomenon. Obviously, that comes with some consequences, such as heavier loads to your transmission towers. So there's trade-offs there. Um, the second cable technology that's being used on transmission lines is called ADSS. So that's the one that's kind of near and dear to my heart now, I guess. But ADSS is an all dielectric cable. That's what ADSS stands for, all dielectric, and then the SS is self-supporting. So it's a cable that doesn't have any metallic or conductive components in it. And it also has internal strength members. So it doesn't have to have any type of an external messenger wire or support wire to be installed in an aerial application. So the advantage of ADSS is if you already have an existing line that has a non-optical shield wire, um, you don't want to replace that shield wire, the existing shield wire with an OPGW cable. You can do an underbuild with an ADSS cable and install that cable on an existing transmission line underneath the conductors. And because it doesn't have any metallic or conductive elements, it can often be installed relatively close to the conductors on that system. So depending on the space potential in the space where you're trying to install that ADSS cable, you might need to go with a track resistant jacket, which is an optional feature. So you can even take advantage of having it a little closer to the conductors. So it can be used for new projects, but a lot of the applications would be for an existing line where you're going to install it as an underbuild. And then the last transmission technology would be wrapped fiber optic cable. This is a very cool technology. It's not deployed as often because I would call it kind of the last resort. But if for some reason OPGW and ADSS are not options for you, you can actually install this wrapped fiber optic cable, which is pictured in the bottom right of my screen here. And it's installed directly onto a conductor, either the shield wire, or you can even install it on the power conductor, the phase conductor itself. And it's like a small, I call it black jacket cable. That's kind of a industry term. If you're not familiar with it, it just means one of these polymer jacketed cables that has the fiber is housed inside these buffer tubes. Um, and you can just actually wrap it around one of those conductors. So it can be used if you're at a hard to reach location, because that smaller cable can actually be brought out in an ATV or a small truck. Sometimes they would even bring it out and walk it out to the installation location. So that can be used on transmission lines, or it can be used on distribution lines if you would see fit. Okay. One thing I'll just point out in case we have anybody who's not that familiar with fiber optic cable technology is that one of the features of OPGW and ADSS, or the wrapped fiber optic cable, that makes it um, suitable for application in an aerial environment is that the fibers inside the cable don't actually experience strain or any tension until that cable sees a pretty significant percentage of its rated breaking strength is until that cable's actually under a pretty significant amount of tension. So that's one way that we can ensure that the fibers are protected and have a long lifetime in their application. And I won't get into any more detail than that, but if that sparks any questions, then we can circle back. All right. In a distribution environment, the three main technologies are all black jacket cable, I'll call them outside plant black jacket cable. And the reason I call them black jacket cable is, as you can see, they have black jackets, but that is because they have a carbon black additive in the jackets that makes them more resistant to UV degradation. And that's as opposed to an indoor style cable, which would be have a flame rating so that it can be used inside a building, but it wouldn't necessarily have that carbon black additive. So those cables would not have the black jacket. So that's just a little distinction in case you're not as familiar with fiber. But in a distribution environment, you wouldn't really see OPGW used. That's more of a transmission application where shield wires would be required. You could potentially see optical neutral wires used, which would be literally a neutral wire that has fiber in it. That's maybe less common because you do have other options for fiber optics on distribution lines. But I'll just throw that out there. As far as ADSS goes, one big advantage that it has in the distribution environment is that it can be installed in the power space a lot closer to the power conductors than some of the alternative cables that have to have metallic messenger wires. So I think you may all be familiar with it, but here is an illustration of that. Power space versus communication space. So I'm saying up here in the top part of the pole, you can actually install the ADSS much closer. And so that frees up some possibilities and opportunities for electric utilities because they have that space kind of all to themselves, whereas the communication space, they might be fighting for that space with other service providers. The other kind of advantage of ADSS in a distribution environment is that it's a one-pass installation. So that means for strand and lash, which I'll kind of explain in a minute, you'll have to install a messenger wire and then come back and lash your fiber cable to that messenger wire. So it's a two-pass installation, whereas ADSS is installed very similar to a conductor or OPGW, if you're familiar with that, where it's just pulled through. You attach it on one end using a pulling cord, and you just pull the cable through in one pass. So that adds up to less installation work, less make ready. Um, so I kind of already explained the strand and lash, but This is a an alternative to ADSS, kind of used for the same purpose, but the strand and lash cable will have a metallic messenger wire, usually galvanized steel. You could use aluminum clad steel if you want. And that's what's actually going to uh, hold the cable up in the aerial application. So then you'd come back and use a smaller lashing wire that wraps around the both the fiber cable and the messenger wire to hold it up. So some advantages of the strain and lash would be that you can typically tension that messenger wire up very high and not be quite as specific in how much tension you apply to the cable, and maybe get a little bit less sag in those for the strand and lash. Maybe some disadvantages would be you can't install it in the power space because it does have that metallic messenger wire that would have induced currents building up on it. And there does uh, tend to be more maintenance involved with the strain and lash solution, as the lashing wires can come loose over time or might need to be tightened up. And then lastly, you can typically lash multiple cables on one messenger wire. So if you needed additional capacity, or maybe even some another carrier wants to be uh, on your infrastructure, you could lash that second cable directly to the existing messenger wire. So there's some trade-offs there. And then lastly, for distribution, you can go underground. So buried fiber optic cable has a lot of installation options. You can do direct buried that has armoring on the cable. You can install it in a duct and either pull it, blow it in. Jetting it in is blowing and jetting are technically slightly different. So there's a lot to get into there. But one of the advantages is that in theory, that underground cable should be more protected than an aerial cable. Obviously, you have to worry about things like backhoes digging your cable up. Um, and rodents potentially, especially at transition zones from where that cable might come out of the ground. But that's also a concern for aerial. And then overall, it tends to be more expensive per foot for doing an underground installation. This picture on the bottom right here illustrates pretty well how underground fiber optic technology has advanced through the years. So the far left is what I would call a traditional loose tube cable, which is a pretty, generic product that has been around a really long time. And as you progress to the right, you can see the fiber cables get smaller and smaller, even though the all four of these cables are actually the exact same fiber count. So you can fit a lot more cable into the same size duct. Uh, you can fit a higher fiber count cable into that duct to increase your capacity. There's technologies using subunitized ducts that you can put underground so that you can have some extra space to install more cable down the road. Um, I'll mention this in a second, but just so we can link this back, typically when you enter a substation, you're going to be transitioning if you're using like an OPGW cable, or even I guess you could be using strand and lash, although that would be less common in this situation. Uh, you'll be transitioning to a black jacket cable. You won't have metallic cable that's actually coming from your transmission line and entering the substation. So that can either be an aerial ADSS cable or a black jacket underground cable. Before I change slides here, the other thing I'll point out about the four designs here, as we progress to the right, you can see um, the I'll call them striations along the outside of these jackets. So these designs are actually made specifically for blowing in or jetting, and the striations on the jacket help the air um, help form an air cushion underneath that cable. So what happens is the cable will actually float on top of a cushion of air as it's being pulled in or blown in. It's not typically going to be pulled in. So there's some interesting technologies out there. If maybe this sparks some ideas and you say, hey, maybe we could use that. So there's plenty of information out there to be had about those. Okay. So lastly, once you reach the substation, like I said, you'll usually going to transition from a metallic cable if you're using metallic cable to a non-metallic cable for that last jump from outside the substation to inside. So this example shows you might have an opportunity to go underground from your splice closure on your transmission line right here, or you could also go aerial to your control house. And then once you get into the control house, it's a it's about customizability and I'll call it modularity. So this is one area where I think the electric utility space can benefit a lot from advancements in um, data center technology. As data centers have advanced, and there's been a lot of focus on improving density, improving flexibility and customizability with the connectivity products that are used in data centers, uh, the power utility could be at risk of falling behind to some extent if we don't look at what is being developed and trying to adapt as well. I'm not saying we don't have the same needs as data centers. So I'm not saying that we need to adopt some of the crazy high capacity technologies that are out there. But I do think that it's worthwhile for us to look at what is out there, what are the best practices, and then, we can learn from that and adopt some of those as well. Um, I will say, most of my experience is with cable. So, the connectivity side of things, um, wouldn't be my primary place of expertise, but the maybe the warning that I would give is uh, make sure that we're staying abreast of those advancements and not falling behind to the extent that the technologies we're using become obsolete. So, for example, it was uh, common knowledge at one point that for short distance runs in data centers or control uh, panels, you're going to use multi-mode fibers because they're just for shorter distances. We're seeing multi-mode fibers being all but phased out, even in data center applications. Um, People are using single mode fibers. The technology for splicing them for doing connectors has advanced to the point that uh, it's economical just to go with the single mode, and it's easy to do. So why go with multi-mode? Um, might be getting a little too involved, but so I just say that to say maybe check in on the state of the technology and make sure that you're staying abreast of those advancements before uh, you find out that what you're used to using isn't going to be available. Um, I wanted to mention here from a digital substations perspective, IEC 61850 is a topic that I have heard brought up multiple times in recent days. And so that would be something that if you're um, looking at a digital substation, improving your technology knowledge in that area, that would be a topic to look into. So, and I'll say it's a driver of having better fiber technology in your substation. versus some of the older technologies that might be uh, going by the wayside. So I'll just leave it at that and go ahead and move on. A couple of the maybe more niche applications that I'd like to touch on. One is fiber to the home, and maybe I'll talk about the advanced metering infrastructure and fiber to the home together here. And I think I'm about running out of time, so I better pick up the pace here. But fiber to the home is kind of a special application or an extension of the fiber optic technology that power utilities are using. So especially with electric cooperatives, they're using the existing infrastructure they have in place to bring broadband to their users and their customers. Um, and I think the reason I'll link this to advanced metering infrastructure is as we look at improving our metering systems, making them smarter so that we can get more information about what users are doing, how much electricity they're using, and for what. Um, the fiber to the home technology that's already out there and being used for fiber to the home applications may be a great starting point for looking at how we implement those advanced metering technologies. So I will caveat this by saying I understand fiber all the way to the meter may not be the technology that ends up taking hold. In fact, it probably won't be just based on what I'm seeing. But how deep does the fiber go? If it doesn't go all the way to the meter, does it go to the antenna? So it's just a question of what technologies will be needed to get the fiber as deep as we want it to go. Uh, dark fiber leasing, I won't dwell on it, but there's an opportunity for power utilities to have dark fibers in their system that they could potentially use as a revenue stream if they are able to lease those to third parties. Um, I know there's a regulation associated with that, different hurdles that have to be jumped through, but that is something that some utilities have taken advantage of to date. And then private LTE fiber is just a supporting technology for that, even though again, it may not be the technology that takes you all the way to the end user, which might be just a technician in the field, for example. But how deep does that fiber go is the question. And this should only take a minute, but as far as technological advancements in the fiber optic field, 200 micron OD fiber is here today, especially in OPGW, and it's available in the loose tube style black jacket cables. This is just a smaller or a thinner coating on your fiber. So it has the same exact performance as existing fibers, can be spliced to them with no issues, but it allows higher cable densities, higher fiber densities in your cable. So that is already currently available. Collapsible ribbon, you'll also hear this called rollable or intermittently bonded ribbon is another technology that is already here today. There's an example of it shown here at the bottom of the screen. That's AFL's spider web ribbon technology. So this is another way that we can have higher density fibers or higher density cables. The other advantage is mass fusion splicing. Whereas with individual fiber cables, you splice one at a time. With collapsible ribbon, you can splice up to 12 at one time with a single splice, a single burn. Fiber optic sensing, um, they can be used. It's being considered for dynamic line ratings, for emergency identification of if there's excessive ice loadings on your lines, something like that. You can use it to detect those um, very quickly and early on. And then multi-core fiber and hollow core fiber are probably more distant future technologies, but they are starting to be adopted in things like data centers where extra high capacity is needed and super low latency. So multi-core fiber just means whereas in a normal fiber, there's just one core where the light travels. In a multi-core fiber, you could have four or five or six cores. So you're multiplying the amount of information you can transmit by whatever multiplier of cores you're using. Hollow core fiber just means that instead of glass being the medium of light propagation, it's air. So it travels just a just enough faster to make a difference as far as low latency goes. All right, I think I've used up my time here, so I'm gonna go ahead and end there.